Hello, everybody. Good to see you again, a number of familiar faces. Thanks for joining us for what is the third of the Blue Raven Poetry Series readings. And it's good to have you here. Special thanks out to my wife, Jody. I'm Bruce Willard. Jody's my wife. And for the gallery space and making this such a wonderful, exciting place to hear poetry. All around you, are not all around, but many places are the feature artist this month, Charles Wilder Oakes. And you'll see quite a bit of his art on the wall back here, and maybe have a moment afterwards to take a look. There's one more reading on the calendar after tonight. The incomparable Major Jackson is here. Major, who hosts the NPR poetry series, The Slowdown, will be reading with Albert Abbonato. And Albert his book, Field Guide for Accidents, was just selected by Mahogany Brown for the National Book Award series. So we're in for a fabulous reading on what is September 18th. It's a Wednesday night, 7 p.m. again, so please join us for that one too. After the reading tonight, as we did with the last ones, I'll do a Q&A session. You can pose any questions to Tim or Adrian, and a good chance to just share thoughts or ask them any questions. And then afterwards, we'll do a book signing. Here to my right, we have books of theirs that you can purchase, and both Tim and Adrian would be happy to sign them for you. You know, I've been thinking a lot about lyric poetry this summer, and especially the last couple of months. Poetry that Major Jackson describes as the voice of a human soul, an individual speaking, testifying, and witnessing. It's poetry that has an element of song to it. And one key element of any great song is the singer's ability to phrase a song in an unforgettable way. The timbre of their voice, their diction. And tonight we're lucky to have two poets who really sing in, I believe, unforgettable ways. So very excited tonight to have both Tim and Adrian here. In his Open Letter 2, which was the preface to Tim Seibles' most current book, the one that we have here for sale and he'll be reading a lot from, Tim said, "I still think poetry could use more attitude, an infusion of kick-ass punctuated by a guffaw." And I think the poems that you'll hear tonight from both Tim and Adrian have plenty of kick-ass and guffaw. So I'm excited for you to hear those. In an era that's obsessed with poems of identity, Adrian Blevins' poems conjugate the identity of the psyche, pitting what seems incongruous, one thing against another, in order to reveal the buoyancy of what's possible. Of her most recent book, Kathleen Graber describes Status Pending as a magical book that transforms our deepest griefs and fears into raucous and bawdy song, poems that reckon unflinchingly with the raw and unbearable emotions of profound loss. And Terence Hayes said, "A prime Adrian Blevins sentence is both warpath and crossroad, catapulting us from anxiety to ecstasy, to lullaby on a bridge of ampersands." And Adrian Blevins' sentence is a live wire, an electric lasso, a clairvoyant conveyor belt containing multitudes. Adrian's most recent poetry book is Status Pending from Four Way Books. Her other full-length collections are Appalachians Run Amok, Live from Homesick Jamboree, The Brass Girl Brouhaha, and she also co-edited Walk Till the Dogs Get Mean, a collection of essays by new and emerging Appalachian writers. She's the recipient of many awards and honors, including a Kate Tufts Discovery Award, a Rona Jaffe Writers Foundation Award, and the 2024 Maine Literary Award for her book, Status Pending. She is a professor of English at Colby College in Waterville, where she directs the creative writing program. Please silence your phones and then hold your applause until the end of her reading, and join me in welcoming Adrian.
Thank y'all for coming so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks to Martha Rose, who published this book I'm getting ready to read from, and Tim, who I'm so excited to read from, and Bruce, who has started this whole new big series. And even though I'm afraid to drive in the dark, my partner / beloved and I have a hotel room, which means I don't have to drive back home. Okay, so the new book is Status Pending, but I'm going to begin with, because Martha talked me into reading. I read recently in New York at Poet's House, and she said, read the set at dinner. She's like, read the set that you did at Poet's House. I'm like, my beloved wasn't there. And she's like, no, read that. And these are divorce poems, okay? And I'm like, I don't really think he's going to like that if I read that. He's not fond of those poems necessarily. So I'm going to write a poem. I'm going to begin with a poem from Appalachians Run Amok, which actually had him in mind. And we're going to begin with this poem and then kind of move, and I'm going to end with 2 new poems. This is before he was my beloved, but he was my dear friend for 20 years. And it's called Pastoral. This is the book where I try to defend rural America. You know, weird thing to do, but now that we have walls, we can do it. Pastoral. My bravery is a daydream that comes from grass, I guess. And from the first biography I ever wrote on George Washington Carver, who I chose to forever love in the 3rd grade and also to persistently analyze, because George was gusty and brawny and neurologically elastic and good at knowing about crop rotation and at mixing things together into a nutritious mash. As a matter of fact, I did write about George in a longhand and a little diary with a silver key, and though I couldn't spell any of the words like Tuskegee, I didn't care, and neither did he, because we had the mockingbirds to keep us company, and not too far away a waterfall we could climb if we were brave enough, which of course we were. Yes, that was a slippery slope, but I loved going to the falls with George, even more than I loved the slick moss and the snakes and cheese sandwiches my mom would make with Wonder Bread, since this was forever ago and Whole Foods hadn't been incorporated yet. And it was, as it happens, nothing but a series of woe-begotten brothers making molasses on a mountain with a mule and a granny who was their mother as well as a stereotype. Yes, I have gone to great lengths to explain myself by way of George to you, and still I feel provoked to continue, or maybe just start all over with my book report on Susan B. Anthony. But since that would require feats of memory and a feistiness far beyond me, I'll just assume you've had enough and wander off to the periphery, where all my people live amongst themselves in an invisible little sachet of thirst-quenching daring do. He says, you don't write love poems. All you write is little mints. And I'm like, it's true, but I'm going to learn how to write love poems next. Can everybody hear me? Is that better? Yes. Okay. This is a status alas. Please feel free to laugh. They're supposed to be funny, even though you're sad. I began to feel helpless and desperate in a familiar way in regard to space and time, alas, and where to put the hands and feet, and how not to talk to strangers and friends, and was raised American and middle class, and watched heaps of TV, and got therefore an addictive personality and a bad biochemistry, and anyhow, just wanted one day to buy a few blankets and quilts and pillows and sheets, plus a new skirt and shirt and rug and mug, though outside already was the beefy F-150 waiting to haul me to a cabin up north, where there would be a tiny roadside store for bread and milk, though also in the driveway hovered somehow conceptually, alas, a mortgage and insurance and car payments and a kid in college and the need to eat more than bread and milk and an allergist and a phlebotomist and the primary care physician and lumberjack and plumber and such and such and such and such and such. So where to put my shopping ache or whatever, as in how to stop it, was really the problem. Like not having bee balm to sniff was the problem. And the fact of there being an excellent greenhouse nearby was the problem. And though a fox I could follow into the woods might help, the problem is a breeder in Oklahoma selling fox kits for $450 each, not including postage and handling. And would I hold mine and caress it like a child, or set it loose is the problem? And how would I feed it, or would it feed me? And what would we have to kill? And how would we sleep? And could one even grow old in a hole of gnawed bones? And would I even fit? And what kind of quilts would there be? And pillows and blankets and sheets. This is a poem where this is a situation where I was having trouble closing all these poems. And so for a long time, I was just throwing foxes at the end of every poem. And it solved a problem that solved a lot of problems. It was like, well, I just need a fox. And it really solved the problem. So I'm going to read one more problem about my weird dad, who was a painter and a painting teacher. This is called Renegade Status. Renegade Status. Yeah, the father was strange, like a smutty goat at the fair, with me in a little knapsack, he'd adorned in pics of nudes to rile the wannabe Nixon cowboys and Nixon bank tellers and sod busters and no coal miners per se, but little Nixon ballet dancers and Nixon climbers of social ladders. And yeah, the father was pissed about Nixon, and loud but festive and drunk, I know, yet loved wisteria, which looked like grapes in real life in Italy, and on wallpaper in Southwest Virginia, and loved Mark Twain and Pete Seeger, and washed my hair in Joy detergent when he couldn't get to the store, and said hamburger was dinosaur, and God was dead. And honest, I love all woe-begotten things, like pigs and birds, and honest to God, wait, let me start again. This is all one sentence. And drunk I know, yet love wisteria, which looked like grapes in real life in Italy, and on wallpaper in Southwest Virginia, and loved Mark Twain and Pete Seeger, and washed my hair in Joy detergent when he couldn't get to the store, and said hamburger was dinosaur, and God was dead. And honest, I love all woe-begotten things, like pigs and birds when midwinter. I love stars, I love peaches, I love dogwoods, I love Ascenditon, but not Nixon, and not war and venal plutocrats, and basic liars and bitches, because the father was strange and drunk, yet bloomed like a fat moonflower inside dumbass little me when I'd run off to mope, as I am doing now, to escape saying how the heart's just a blowtorch, no matter how goofy and late the date. All right, so here's what Martha wants me to do. So I'm just going to do it. Flight status. Left for me the ash to heave. Left the lash, left the sieve. Left the chime, left the wren. Left the rain, left the ache. Left me dragged and left me rucking. Left such legroom, he left me a crypt. And blew out the stamens, okay, and blew out the sap, until finally I got it that he leaving left the milk our baby spilled like a veil across the decades, like he left me counting how much airspace we had to cross to get to the end of it, like he left me to say how it was to stand over so much slope, to know to be airborne, which is what I am knowing, plus we're all just vapor, plus a bell fire, and to wake up, motherfucker, and to hew it. Code status. But how to hew it, as in how to axe it and not end up too loud and or barbarous and or dirtied like a smuck in a park in a winter of rain. How to hoist it, and it be the halt of nothing but what is the halt of. Halt of the reign of the lag between what was and what's not. Halt of man and woman as crock, like water under tillage over lean bluestone. And God forbid you should be unreliable as a witness, since already it thins like ghost spit in the back of the neck, like he was a blowfly in the eaves of your house. Or you were, or the 22 years like pearls on a string down a sully drain exceedingly somehow were, or the riffle of a leaf, and or some fog, like the blur of the undo of a rub out, of the cease of the hum of a nothing fade. Injury status. Being left by your husband after 22 years, all cloak and dagger, like my husband left me, is like being hit in the head by the corpse of a fat ballerina or a snake-handling megawatts church in Needmore, Virginia, like you're the tree of yuck and he's the wave that makes the wind. Or it's like your paper. It's like your peed on paper. Like your spit that used to be paper in the girl's diary with the word deadfall written on it and steamroll and stymie and drub and crush. Like you're the runt egg of a hummingbird and he's a sequoia. Or you're an aphid with a respiratory infection and he's a paleontologist on the back of a pterodactyl. Or you're basically just dying and he's whatever the opposite of an ambulance is. And you're dying. And he's the opposite of an ambulance, and you're dying, and he's whatever the exact opposite of an ambulance is, such as he's a terrorist, or he's strychnine, or a tsunami of swords in the hands of mass rotters, or a poem that doesn't turn like poems should, but just says the thing it says over and over, like being left by your husband of 22 years, all cloak and dagger, like my husband left me, is like being hit in the head by the corpse of a fat ballerina, or a snake-handling megawatts church in Needmore, Virginia, like you're the tree of yuck and he's the wave that makes the wind. Needmore, Virginia is absolutely true. It's on Highway 58 going all the way up to North Carolina, and it's got population. It says Needmore, Virginia, population 18. And that is 100% true. Mainers will understand that. Yeah. Okay. RX status. All the poems in this book have the word status in them, except the first one and the last one. RX status. Get little poem, little shoelace between death and me, the fuck out of bed, and tell the people how dumb marriage is, how dull and jackass, how unrife but nonstop. Tell them for love you need no kids for starters, and monstrous swaths like meadows of things, like horizons and moonscapes and skylines to want, and glass buildings and rope ladders, and a faraway beach and hummocks of snow, and fields of breeze rain in the hair and on the roof, and a drawing pad like a humongous white canvas of yes, like fields of lemon on the lips, and not, just not, the mouth like a hinge of spit, mouthing the end, Holy Writ, but counterfeit of it. All right, this is the last one of these poems, settlement status. Settlement status. Y'all need to laugh as much as possible. Settlement status. You take the cranberries, and I'll take the mice. You take the lawnmower, and you take it, and I'll take the rake. You take the good nozzle, and I'll take the grass seed that I will eat while drinking the wine that I'll obviously also have to take, as well as the generator that I'll sit on and pretend is a vacuum. You take the window, and I'll take the Windex. You take the light bulbs, and I'll take the sockets, and you can take the camera. If I can have that time we first saw Calvary Cemetery in New York and Queens when I was like, oh, and you were so very tragically mad in a way. And to be fair, it really was snowing hard. And on your shoulders was the drudgery not to go too fast on worn tires, not to even mention the desire to play the guitar with me not nearby, plus the fact of how crushing life was going to be in Maine, where so many trees had to be marked and felled and stacked and chipped and chopped and lit and burned and scooped as ashes out, plus so many nerve-wracking shipwrecks at your work, where all of the hurt of all of the people of all of poor America sit to this very day all upon you, sort of snuffing you out. And so you take the headstone, baby, and I'll take the grave. Yeah. All right. Good. Yeah, he's going to Africa. He's running away. That's good. Okay, I'm going to read two more of these and then two new poems. Does that sound good? Are we good? Okay. Facebook status on why the marriage failed. Okay. No bareback. I mean horses. No ottoman or island to put the feet on. Not enough boodle and loot. Too much bourbon and gin. Not enough H2O, except in the form of ice. Too much capitalism, barbarism, neutralism, escapism, stigmatism, euphemism, like a greasy lagoon down the body rind of each of us, the five of us, the five of us, the five of us. Too much homework and beef. Too fast the minutes. No polecat, no jackdaw, no bullfinch, no wagtail, no linnet. Too fast the hours and years and years. We needed a smaller bed, less empire, tent, tender fire. This is called resolution status, and I'm reading this from Martha. Okay, it's 2 sections, and then I'll read 2 new poems, and then we get to hear Tim. Like, 1, that place where the husband had carved a halt into the wall, that grind where you and he had lived, though he didn't hunt, though he did. Do not forget that lack of sound after the sound of the gun going off. That swish of the difference between the tree and the rain, that air between the water and the wave, that hatchet job, that hole in that bed, the dearth of the loss of that stalemate. Like before you were born and once you die in a cesspit under sea, like your heart was hooked to a backlog of machetes, and you were a shovel, a bucket, a backhoe, a spade. You almost put your ear to the window. That is, you did. You felt to yourself that the world was no more than one less guffaw or wince. It's hard to say which. That is, whatever it was that was out there after your husband left. Bobcat, chipmunk, woodpecker, fox, madman, octopus, cop. It wanted you to make a fire. You really could hear that. You were the real pair. You couldn't get enough. 2, you have to remember it to eradicate it. You were a thing to be collected into a cup to be tossed. Always was the thing torn off. And here it was time to come to the senses and think about something else for once, like dead trout, orphans in vestibules, muling aggregations of one-eyed dolls on glass shelves in antique stores, in the most rural of counties on the worst days in April in the rain, and the husband out there elsewhere like a wet match, like a vellum nut, like a suit on the back of a chair during the last bits of a long week of fast. Only he's so sleazy, you need a loofah and somebody to pump the well so you can work up a good lather. Only you are stuck to your chair in your house on earth like you always were, the shoestring in the dog's mouth. Old stub in your jaw like a blast. Old crash in your pectus, and each cell's got an eye, and each eye's pulled out a monocle with a whole body looking up through the nerves for some way out, and the heart especially vibrating like it's the frothing part of an epileptic ship. O freighter heart, O flotilla heart, O cosmic belligerency of the ditched heart, God has been gone without a word, like nobody, like nothing, nada, 0, 0, nil, nil, not. Thank you, guys. And I just read 2 new poems. I was talking to Bruce about how you don't know what you're doing next, and so I just don't know what I'm doing, and so I'm just randomly trying, except my goal is to write love poems, but can I write funny love poems? Yeah, no, you think so? Yeah. Domestic. Another word for kid is it. You always love but do not always like it. The fathers throw up their hands like weeds in a brawny wind to forsake it. Even in your mind when it's middle-aged with a belly, it is it. It's like dry grain in your esophagus. It is a pall, a siren, a starving mass of moss in the sunbeam, in the kitchen, in the chair. It disappoints near the peacocks always with its headphones on, where it wanders the causeway. It's such a dope at the cabaret. Plus it's drunk, plus it pees, plus it weeps and weeps and weeps. It carries about it the aroma of the need of a paramedic. It is the opposite of anything. It's not just anyone. It is disgraceful in all the bathrooms. The whole need for poetry in the first place was to find a way to describe it. Its purpose was to be the poetry and therefore the meaning and therefore the life, but it is not. So you had to have more and more and more of it. You kept on going with it while the fathers threw up their hands like dandelions to desert it. You see the fathers in the faces of it. Fathers like thistles and shrubs. Fathers like knapweed. Fathers like crabgrass with their thumbs in their teensy mouths of fay. The problem with a rigmarole is when to stop it. I choose this way. All right, last poem. This is these are like, maybe I'll just write a bunch of Ars Poeticas. It's called I Miss Wonder Bread in this poem. I miss Wonder Bread in this poem because I am a teenager in it. And because the 21st century has not begun to outrage me yet. And because I am somewhat like a teapot in my bell bottoms at this time. And because I am like salt at the bottom of a well. And because this salt is a kind of rock I can't wash out. And because what I know is not very much. And because mostly my way is mostly to mope. Yeah, this poem has come to earth to tell you this. And something about the mother, something about the father, because everyone's all out to lunch, eating cucumber sandwiches down at that diner and wearing miniskirts. Something about the moon, Freud, women's lib, and orange juice. Oh, and yummy gin in a wavy glass the color of charred butter, and TV, and sex. The rich aren't all that rich in the mountains, but they're way richer than you. I mean me. They take their kids to the zoo. This is a poem because I say it is. That's my hardcore Ars Poetica right there, to blow little pieces of everything I hate but want back anyway everywhere. Thank you.
Damn, there's some good poems there. That was great. There's so much that I love about Tim Seibles, the poetry and the man himself. His love of blues and jazz, that he was born in the city of brotherly love. The short beat way his enjambed line moves, half surprised by what it reveals. His humble, honest, outrageous tone, his voice, and usually his hat. But there's nothing I love quite so much than the love that comes through his poem, the love of other poets, of musicians, his journey of discovery, and poetry and all that it can do in a broader world. As Tim says in Open Letter 2, which opens his newest collection, poetry is the place where, if I'm not intimidated, I can say the most dangerous, most tender, most mysterious thing I know, where clarity subverts the half-said, the never-said. Tim says the unsayable as well as any poet I know, what all of us who write and want to write, but haven't his heart-skilled gift to sing. He was born in Philadelphia in 1955 and is author of numerous poetry. What's that?
On August 7th.
On
1955.
You are absolutely right. Happy birthday, Tim. Thank you. You tried to get away with that, didn't you? Oh, it didn't work. Thank you. Born in Philadelphia in 1955 and is author of numerous poetry collections, including Body Moves in 1988, Hurdy-Gurdy 1992, Hammerlock in 99, Buffalo Head Solos in 2004, and Fast Animal, which was a finalist for the 2012 National Book Award and winner of the Theodore Ruttke Memorial Prize in Poetry. He was an NEA Fellow, recipient of the fellowship from Provincetown Fine Arts Workshop. In 2013, he received the Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Award for poetry. And Voodoo Libretto, his most recent collection of new and selected poems, was released in 2022. Tim taught at Old Dominion University, the University of Southern Maine's Stone Coast MFA program, and at Cave Canem. He lives in Norfolk, Virginia, and was the state's poet laureate between 2016 and 2018. Tim?
Thank you very much. I better take my water. Thanks, everybody, for coming. It's a real pleasure to be here. Very sweet introduction. I was just going to start with just one of these tiny verses from Rumi because I just think it's sweet and I don't know, a little sweetness goes a long way. He has all of his pieces were numbered for some reason, so this is 388, whatever that could possibly mean. I would love to kiss you. The price of kissing is your life. Now my loving is running toward my life, shouting, "What a bargain! Let's buy it." Anyway, that's from Rumi's book, The Open Secret. Some of you, of course, know this book. If you don't, I recommend it really highly. I think it's one of those books that, it's very easy to find yourself, weighed down by the way things are. But this book, gives you a little lift, and I love it for that. And because it's my birthday, I thought I would read a couple of odes. This one is called Ode to Your Mother. And I wrote this, I tried to build it to the extent that I could out of things my mother said to me about when she was pregnant with me. So then I wander off into other directions. But so a lot of the details you'll hear were things that she said in various ways at various times. Ode to Your Mother. Do you remember yourself 6 months after conception? Far from the egg, your heart chirping like a hungry chick, those unwalked feet, fat crickets kicking around, eyes blind as buttons, cell by cell, rod by cone, getting ready to call up the colors and lights. And your mother, often craving licorice with apple pie, outside catching a bus with you in her warm pond, a golden koi nosing the surface for bits of bread, you, the unnamed stranger, coming for the long stay, traveling all night, your face taking shape in the shadows. Or maybe she sees herself, a bass drum with something booming inside her, a small theater off Broadway with someone soon to be famous pacing the wings. So much promise. Were you restless to begin? All your vitals rehearsing their hard parts. Did you have any sense that she was out there? Your brain almost building itself, a secret mansion, 1,000,000 doors to 1,000,000 rooms, each with a candle. Your little head holding the Milky Way rekindled in miniature. Consciousness, the great mischief, waking up to try again. One particular flicker in the cosmic sea, a starfish riding the big back of a blue whale, which swims like a planet, gliding the sun's slow waves, with you beginning to insist inside this woman you hardly know, though she is everything, steadying her new weight on earth. Your heart, blind as a kite, wind on the rise, 3 months from day. Did you suppose an inkling of what would be out there? The invisible air filling us up, rabbits in hats, hints, houses, banana slugs, bacteria and trees. Other people, the look on your face, already amazed, or whatever comes, just before that. This next poem is ode to my father, or ode to your father, but I'm talking about mine. I make reference to Yusef Lateef. Some of you know who that is, but if you don't, Yusef Lateef was a jazz flautist, and my father loved him. Ode to your father. Sunday nights, he put on Yusef Lateef, and that flute stole secrets usually locked in the moon's cool house. And you watched his head nod yes to all he couldn't say, then tiptoed back to TV, hoping he'd forget it was past your time for bed. When he yelled at you, you probably heard his father yelling at him, though you couldn't recognize the flat "don't talk back" settled beneath his voice like a big bass at the bottom of a lake. Growing up, he said, "Yes, sir," to that brassy baritone. And wasn't his father's voice a part of him too? That part that seemed tied up in some long ago trouble, even when he sat in the shade baiting a hook. Hard to picture it now, him in his straw hat and high-water dungarees. Oklahoma boy moping home with a loaf of bread. His buddies teasing and tempting him back to the park. How did he face his first bully? The one that cracked his tooth and cut his arm. Ever wonder where he got that hot grease in the face glare? The look that made you so afraid? His father made him fight that tough kid twice. And at times, didn't the whole country try to break his skin? Waiting for him on every corner like a bully. What did he make of all those stores that wouldn't let him in? He worked a slaughterhouse, stiff with dried blood. His overalls could stand by themselves. In spite of this, you found him years later, your pop mopping the kitchen, whistling My Satin Doll, a tune you hadn't heard, so half listened as if he were some odd station on the radio. And when he'd start the old "things were different back then," it sounded like "once upon a time." You shrugged and secretly rolled your eyes, but half of you is still made of him, his long arms, his love of hats, your solitary heart. Half jazz, half ready to fight. Your father didn't kiss you like your mother did, but every October he drove you to the Arboretum to see the bright orange leaves, even when he had a lot on his mind. That mind you'll never see inside, though you know it's packed with good songs, some hard feelings, and all the stuff he will not say. My brother, my older brother, is named Tom, after my father and his father and his father. But he was known as Tom the Bomb. And he imagined himself a kind of Don Juan. And so this next poem is called Notes from Big Bruh, Tom the Bomb, Don Juan of Germantown High School, circa 1967. I say, "Tom, there's this girl." He says, "Is she fine like apple wine? She fine enough to be a friend of mine? Her name is Tina. So you want to give Tina your wiener? And Doc's having a party. Is she tuned to your station? She believing what you faking? and she's gonna be there. Tell her you know the way to San Jose. Tell her you gotta graze in her grass. Tell her you ain't too proud to beg. Yeah, you gots to rock Hudson on her. Give her the movie star moon gazer, the look of love. Say, my duty is your booty. Tell her your Peter is sweeter and you know how to treat her. You gotta sing a little bit, little brother. Gots to hit her with a little bit of Sinatra. Everybody loves my body sometime. That was him. All that stuff, that's from him. I read it once. He's seen me read once in my life. And he was in the audience, and I made sure I read that poem. And he said, man, I don't remember all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you don't. I'm sure you don't. You were ruining my young mind with all that stuff. All right. This is a poem called Allison Wolfe. I think most everyone in here will know all the references because you're all somewhat in my age range. Yeah, I don't think I need to explain anything. Allison Wolfe. Like a river at night, her hair, the sky starless, street lights glossing the full dark of it. Was she Jewish? I was 17, an Afro-American senior, transferred to a suburban school that held just a few of us. And she had light brown eyes and tight tube tops and skin white enough to read by in a dim room. It was impossible not to be curious. Me and my boy Terry talked about pink babes sometimes. We watched I Dream of Jeannie and could see Barbara Eden in her skimpy finery lounging on our very own lonely sofas. We wondered what white girls were really like, as if they'd been raised by the freckled light of the moon. I can't remember Allison's voice, but the loud tap of her strapless heels clacking down the halls is still clear. Autumn, 1972. Race was the elephant sitting on everybody. Even as a teenager, I took the weight as part of the weather. A sort of heavy humidity felt inside and in the streets. One day, once upon a time, she laughed with me in the cafeteria. Something about the tater tots, I guess, or the electric blue Jell-O. Usually, it was just some of us displaced brothers talking noise, acting crazy, so she caught all of us way off guard. Then, after school, I waved, and she smiled, and the sun was out, that 3 o'clock after-school sun rubbing the sidewalk with the shadows of trees. And while the wind pitched the last of September, we started talking, and the dry leaves shook and sizzled. In so many ways, I was still a child, though I wore my 17 years like a matador's cape. The monsters that murdered Emmett Till, were they everywhere? I didn't know. I didn't know enough to worry enough about the story white people kept trying to tell. And given the thing that America is, sometimes such stupidity works for the good. Occasionally, history offers a reprieve. Everything leading up to a particular moment suddenly declared a mistrial. So I'm a black boy suddenly walking the Jenkintown streets with a white girl, so ridiculously conspicuous, we must have been invisible. I remember her mother not being home, and cold Coca-Cola in plastic cups, and the delicious length of Allison's tongue. And we knew without saying anything, we were kissing the color line goodbye. And on for an hour we kissed, hardly breathing, the light almost blinding whenever we unclosed our eyes, as if we had discovered the dreaming door to a different country and were walking through it, as if we could actually walk the glare we'd been born into, as if my hand on her knee, her hand on my hand in her hair, her mouth on my mouth, opened and opened and opened. Here's I've been writing a bunch of blues villanelles. This one I'm reading for you, Glenn. Where are you? This one's for you, Glenn. It's called Dead a While Blues Villanelle. The villanelle, most of you know the form. It's repeating form, and it repeats in a way that is not exactly like, but certainly similar to the way the blues refrains repeat or the blues lines repeat. And it's interesting to know that I believe it was, I think this is right, the French peasantry created that form while working in the fields. I believe that's correct. And so therefore it also bears some historical connection, right? Because people who were enslaved in this country would sing, they would use field hollers, and those repetitions became the blues. So I just think it's really interesting how people, when they're put under duress, God damn it, they sing, right? All right. This is called Dead a While Blues Villanelle. Most of the time, I just live in denial. My brother told me, ain't nothing for sure. Went to bed, tried to be dead for a while. Ever have days when you feel half wild? When bad news has already broke down the door? Just take a nap and sweet dream in denial. Been looking for help, but I misplaced the file. Maybe should drown out the day with a snore, get back to sleep, and go dead for a while. Seems like even good sense is on trial. Somebody said you can't say soul no more. Mostly I hum in this trance with denial. I guess all the good shit's gone out of style. Can't even wear my blue tie-dye no more. This ain't the 60s. Was I dead for a while? I shouldn't let so much shit spin my dial. Ought to go get some good wine from the store and lip sync a song with Boone's Farm in denial. Put on some Hendrix, maybe play Voodoo Child, raise a little sand, then lay on the floor. It's not so hard to be dead for a while. You'll probably find me face down on the pile. Don't want to mess with this place no more. Most of the days I get by with denial, then catch some Z's and get dead for a while. Amusement park. Shuffling along, shouldering softly through the crowd. You don't remember the admission or planning to come. The rides look new, but it's mostly the paint. Every day the sun disappears and reappears as if unsure of the situation. Your parents used to talk about being young once. Now you wonder what they really wanted to say. Shadows scratch the sidewalk. Popcorn, hot dogs, pizza, aromas stoke the breeze. Of course, fear takes the air too, like the kind of perfume you only notice when it's gone. You told your friends, I'm sick of this shit, but somehow, here you are, back in line, itching for the wicked flea, a ride famous for jumping the tracks. But the whole park is like that. Even the cross-eyed calico creeps low to the ground as if ready for some bad surprise. Worrying this way, the cat is a lot like the people who come here to undo their daily lives, built on hard work and scary news and bigotry, which usually moves around disguised as someone else. Wherever you turn, women, men, almost every hue, some skin so dark it holds a hint of stars, other faces white as paper, cinnamon gold, cocoa with a kiss of brass. Of course, the fear is shared unevenly with all these colors and the history they recall. But the people remain lovely, enticing, a smorgasbord ready to be consumed, and though strangers exchange harmless glances, each suspects the rest of playing a part in a story that seems impossible to explain. Like the park itself, both natural and not, both deadly and full of fun. The crazy crook is the scariest, guaranteed to remix your mind. Some get on with glee, some with stolid faith, but you go half doubting, half hoping it'll be all right, like your parents said. Though lately, you haven't seen them on any rides. Its height is legendary, the loop-de-loops ridiculous. Your friends believe it's the one ticket worth fighting for. That long first climb, the haphazard twists and dives, the whoops, the shrieks, and every time somebody yelling, "Look, Ma, no hands." Maybe the loudmouth is a superhero, ready to pretend the courage that might make death and his shiny badge back off. Or maybe he's just another dumb chump begging to be noticed in a world that repaints and forgets, refuels and drives on. Sit your simple ass down, you snap, while the crazy crook rolls over those bone-bending swerves that snatch the riders back to their busy, befuddled, stampeded lives, out of hand and harder, faster, as if some cranked-up kidnapper has everyone locked in his trunk and won't stop stomping the gas. The days blur. Each month honks by like a V of Canada geese. You spin around. Your friends keep testing their new knees. How did you get used to this? When did you forget how to sleep? What made your parents play certain words over and over? Job, success, love, responsibility. And where, exactly where, did they go? Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 2. We only opened our doors when we had to. We shut our windows, but the smell kept getting worse, as if someplace nearby the carcass of an ape was burning. Still, it seemed like we were waiting for someone. It had gotten late, but we kept changing our clothes. All we really wanted was a little sleep before Monday put us back to work. But we had been asleep while the new neighbors were moving in. And When we finally did fall awake, we saw them, somehow looking exactly like us, waving from our windows, wearing everything in our closets, honking by in our cars, while we stood in the street, touching our faces. During the Bush administration, which seems like a good old day at this point, I wrote a series of poems in the voice of Blade the Vampire Slayer. And it was me trying to articulate some kind of rage, resistance, whatever, to what felt then like, and was, a really well-organized form of evil. So I'll read this to you, my man, Bruce. Blade Unplugged. It's true, I almost never smile. But that doesn't mean I'm not in love. My heart is that black violin played slowly. You know that moment late in the solo when the voice is so pure, you feel the blood in it? The wound between rage and complete surrender. That's where I'm smiling. You just can't see it. The sound bleeding perfectly inside me. The first time I killed a vampire, I was sad. I mean, we were almost family. But that's so many lives ago. I believe in the cry that cuts into the melody, the strings calling back the forgotten world. When I think of the madness that has made me, and the midnight I walk inside all day long, when I think of that one note that breaks what's left of what's human in me, man, I love everything. We'll shift gears. I will not hold you. Mightn't I? No, I'm kidding, I would not. This is a poem called With No Hat. I wrote a series of poems in which the poem is a character in the poem. The poem itself is a character in the poem. I think I have to read it so it'll make any sense. The title goes right into the body of the poem. With no hat, no shirt, no pants, the poem walks the early afternoon. Summer sun spots the odd shape on the road and offers a cloud for shade. The poem is headed downtown with its revelations, its beauty, all the intricate parts, finally open to the general public, who, though they tried to deny it, have always wanted to see beneath the vintage clothes. The poem's previous modesty and stealth, its humility and restraint, its patient, soft-spoken invitations have served no one, really. Not even the poem itself, which has always wanted the spotlight. The red carpet, the sequined gown, the top hat, velvet lapels, ruby slippers, all its big front teeth inlaid with gold. The first people the poem passes look away, look again, their hope swelling like a fresh bump on the head. One guy tries 911, but the 9 skips, then shimmies like a new disciple. And the brother's big fro bursts into cotton candy. The poem loves it, loves being out, being seen. The almost cool walk flips to a Denzel stroll. I'm kicking new flavor in your ear, it says unquietly, meeting the eyes of drivers who swerve, so sure they see what must be a mirage. A buck-naked angel rump-shaken beside the witless sprawl of their lives. Their heads anointed with apocryphal music. The cars refuse the road, their horns reborn, scatting a fanfare of funkadelic clarinets. This is my body, the poem says. Take and eat. All right. This is a poem just called From Darkness. Sunrise runs a fresh wind through the leaves. A night turns back into shadows. Waking up, the birds tell first light everything they know. Why do we keep killing each other? The earth is a woman who walks in the sky. Walks in the sky. Her legs so long, you can't even see them. For no reason, the morning comes back again, saying, come back, open your eyes. I'll read you this, and I'll bid everyone adieu on this thing. This is a brand new poem. I was in the Caribbean not too long ago on this island called Salt Key. It looks like K. It's spelled C-A-Y, but everyone pronounces it Key. So I'll read this. This is the first time I'm reading it. It grew out of, I thought about, there's a gesture that that Neruda makes in a poem whose title I cannot remember now, but I just loved it. It was a very tender reminiscence about someplace he'd been and had returned to. And so some of you might recognize the gesture, but it's not very obvious, I guess. Anyway, it has an epigraph. There was a guy on the island named Maurice, and we met him when we first got there, and he said, the salt companies left in '69 because it was a big salt producing island. The poem is just called Island of Salt Key. July 2024. Mr. Polly is still here, 92 and thin as a heron's leg. And Miss Nettie baking big breads, bright white hair like moonlight above her brown face. And Willie from Haiti tending his tiny bar, and Eloisa who lights her store with a smile. No one is rich, but nobody seems poor. The friendly breeze waves, then wanders. The ocean shrugs and laughs. On Salt Key, history walks with a bold nonchalance. The Salinas, salt marshes muddy from neglect. The 40-some black folks, children of the children of Africans, bought to rake and carry this flavor for the world. Business buildings abandoned now, gaunt, ready for collapse. And white people, mostly gone, but for blue-eyed Beatrix and a British couple. Europe's invasion, drifting like steam from their tea. But the beaches are egret white, and the sea beats bachata on the rocks, says, sunlight moves in me. There are more donkeys than people, more houses for sale. Rough roads, rock-strewn and jotted with scat. Wild roosters shouting for the subtle hens clucking in the underbrush. Ants all over, paving thin lanes to their hidden cities. I'm an American, black, and full of America, so I don't belong anywhere, really. But I would come back to say yes to Salt Key and the chance to forget that. Yes to the wary lizards and the donkeys whose sleepy eyes blink yes to any water and something green to eat. And of course, I mean yes to the ocean, so many shoals of blue, so many cool flames of impossibly ebullient blue. And the grasses leaning with the wind, the bumblebees always revving their wings, and the night rains, the thorny acacias, and always a little salt on your skin. Thank you. Very kind, thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks, Adrian. I thought I'd just open up to maybe some question and answers. Any comments anybody wants to share? Any questions for Tim or Adrian? One thing both of them have in common is a lot of years teaching in creative writing programs. I might just start by asking, how does that impact your own poems, the teaching process?
For one, the first thing is that education works best when it's like working both ways, I guess. And so I'm learning, I'm doing, things are really going well is when I'm learning from my students. I've been teaching for a really long time, so it gets more difficult. I'm getting older, they're getting younger, and that process is getting a little bit more difficult now. So that's one thing. I mean, it's a great privilege to be able to teach poetry. Like my classes, people that sign up and they're not required, right? So it's self-selecting. So it's a Colby. So I just feel hugely privileged to be able to do that. The other thing is, people in my classes and those workshops, you write a poem a week, and so by the end of the year, I've read 1,000 poems, and that's exhausting. And so it's hard to write and read other people's poems at the same time. So all of that energy kind of goes to my students, and the older I get, the harder it gets to write. And it's harder it is for me to write and teach writing at the same time. I don't know about you.
Well, the only way I was able to negotiate the teaching and the writing is when I was writing, I was always writing first thing in the morning before I got into my teacherly year, because there's a different way of thinking about, teaching someone to write than it is when you're trying to invent. And so that was the only way I was able to do it. So more or less every day, first thing, 7 a.m.-ish, I would go to a coffee shop, put on these, those sound damping headphones that construction workers wear or whatever. I would put those on and I would just read old drafts and go over them or and try to write something new. But that's how I started my days. And then when you move into the teaching mode, it's a different way of thinking about writing and thinking, of course, if you're workshopping and critiquing, it's a different way of imagining, your relationship to poems, But I'm with her. I'm all about, trying to have it be a two-way street. It's hard to teach poetry and not learn something like teaching. I mean, things that you forget, because certain fundamentals that, by now become somewhat second nature to us because we've been at so many workshops as undergrads and graduate students. But when you have to teach certain ideas about critique, then you have to say, oh, I remember now, this is why couplets do this, or this is why, you don't end the line break on a preposition, generally speaking. You don't end the line on a preposition or something. There are just certain things that you just remember, some things that maybe you can get lazy about or casual about. You have to teach and you're trying to instill a certain discipline in the student. You gotta be kind of on it yourself.
So I was a college professor for 23 years. I actually lived in Hampton, Virginia. And I was at William and Mary. Very close. And I'm a scientist. And so I know when I was in college, I revered my professors, right? I just believed everything they said and ate it up. And boy, that is not how students are today. And that could be a challenge in the sciences, but I wonder if you've been teaching for a long time, that could be a wonderful thing in the arts, perhaps. Like, if, I don't know if you saw that same lack of reverence, or that they didn't have to worry, would it free their minds more, not having it? Or maybe you didn't see that.
I didn't get it so much.
So I've been teaching for about 30 years, so I'm not like I'm on 30, like 10 years in Virginia and Hollins. I was in Hollins for 10 years. And then I gave a pulpit, right? So humanities all the way. And I think that with today's students, I think that we're actually going through a generational kind of gap thing that's starting to happen. You know, like my youngest is 25, my oldest is almost 40, my child. And I can really see the difference in generations. And I think there's a pushback. There's like I never thought that I would be like one of the older guys or whatever, but apparently I am. And so I'm noticing that in my students a little bit more than I used to. And there's an internet poetry culture. And and I don't know who these people are, but they suck. They really are. They're like, I felt, so you say, well, this is kind of cliche, and they're like, that's how I felt. And I'm like, that's kind of cliche. So I think that I'm getting more resistance now than I used to, and I don't think it's about reverence. I just think that it's just, they have their own opinions, and we're old, and I don't know. They don't listen to me. They listen to my beloved all the time, but they don't listen to me. No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, I retired 6 years ago, so I may not be getting the same speaking that you're getting.
Yeah.
But for the most part, the students in writing classes were pretty respectful. I didn't get a lot of, I like it this way kind of attitude, because I think, first of all, they knew I would say, well, what are you doing in the workshop? If you don't need to learn anything, why are you here? That's what I would have said to them, But yeah, I think for the most part, the students, since they would choose to be there, I think they want to listen to you. If you've given your life to poetry, they think, okay, they must know some stuff about poetry. They've been doing it for so long. So I didn't get a lot of that. And certainly at the grad level, I didn't.
I was going to say, you saw grad.
Yeah, and undergrad. Yeah. But so the grad students certainly were still, manageable. I don't know if that's changing now. I don't know. But yeah, I didn't have a hell of a time with my writing students. Now, the general education classes, where you're teaching American lit to people who are just trying to get a credit so they can go to some other major, that's an entirely different experience. They're just there to get a grade. They'll let you know that they're to get a grade. But in many cases, they're not particularly invested in the idea that they can learn something that will be useful for their lives. They're not there for that.
Those are my favorite classes to teach, are the non-science majors. You can just teach them cool stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes you can make converts, which of course is the great lovely thing. And someone leaves your class saying, I think I want to be an English major now. That is great, but that's not the common thing with that.
I just want to touch on something Tim just said, which is that I had a student who was converted, but wasn't converted by me, was converted by Tim. Because I invited Tim to, Tim just kind of offered to come read in my class, my intro lit class. And there was a young woman, Amanda. Yeah. She kind of turned it completely around in my intro class. She changed her major to English, and I think creative writing was her emphasis. And then she followed on to MFA at ODU. I don't know if she was in here.
I sure did that part.
Yeah. And so I had that conversion experience, but help.
Anybody else? Question?
Can you talk a little bit about when you're writing towards a collection? Do you start with a vision or an idea, or are you just writing and then eventually noticing patterns?
Absolutely, just the latter, right? So you just writing poems and you're like, I have no idea what's happening, and it's a big hot mess for a really long time until suddenly you realize that they're, I think when you write a collection, because you wrote all the poems, they're going to seem more connected than you think at the time. You think these are all just disconnected. There's a similar voice, and you're writing them in a certain sort of time period. But I've never really had an idea that I've started as with a book and put it together. It's been a long time of just drafting it.
Yeah, really similar.
Yeah.
Really same thing. You write poems and you write poems, and then at a certain point, which usually takes me 3 or 4 years, sometimes 5 or 6 years, it depends. And then you start, maybe you recognize that maybe there's a certain kind of connectivity between some pieces, or that certain pieces are arguing with other pieces, which I think is also really valuable. When pieces are, for lack of better term, when they're kind of fussing with each other in terms of tone, in terms of subject matter and stuff like that, then you can see maybe that can become part of the book's tension, the matter tension. But yeah, for me, you discover that later on. I yet to start a book thinking, I think this book is going to be about. I've never started a book that way. I know people who do though, but I do not know.
Maybe one more question. Anybody else?
What's each of you, what are your 2 favorite poets right now? I know about that.
I am a huge Diane Seuss fan. Right, Diane Seuss. And I know everybody loves her so much, I can't help it over, but I think she's amazing. Diane Seuss. So Frank Sonnets is modern poetry is new poetry. I think Frank Sonnets, that's the closest book of poems it's such a memoir. It's like it's absolute memoir in poems. She's a master. She's my favorite poet. You guys know Diane Seuss?
Yeah.
Oh, too.
SEUSS.
Yeah, they got your uncle.
Yeah. Very rude.
That's very good.
She's awesome.
Tim, how about you?
Yeah, well, I think I said it there, but yeah, probably from I know primarily in translation. So I can read some Spanish, but not like how many really need to be able to. I love him because of the range of his work, political, the personal, love poems, surrealist poems, and he was all over the place, that whole book of political poems in which he takes all the colonizing countries to task, I just admire the range of his work and his willingness to go basically in any direction he could imagine. I love him for that. Other infants, it's not easy to pin it down to 2. But I also, okay, it is, as you say, I don't want to leave someone out, but you end up doing it. I really love, the mischief in Stephen Dobbins' narrative. I think he's really subversive and interesting and wildly imaginative in a way that I admire, though I don't know about her write poems exactly like him, but I still like the daring in his poems. So Dobbins would be another one, but I can go on and on. I love Van Sexton, I love, you're so coming out. I love too many people, so that's all I do.
Terrence Hayes.
Yeah, Hayes, yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming, and we will have books for sale, and Tim and Adrian will be signing. Thank you guys very much for fabulous reading, and thank you all for coming. I look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you.